Welcome, dreamer of shadows and light, to the complete chronicles of transformation, where love becomes obsession, sanity surrenders to chaos, and a brilliant mind descends into beautiful madness. Tonight, we shall trace the extraordinary journey of Dr. Harley Quinzel, from her troubled childhood through her metamorphosis into the enigmatic Harley Quinn, and beyond to her ultimate evolution into something unprecedented. Let the rhythm of Gotham's heartbeat and the whisper of carnival music carry you into peaceful slumber as we explore every twist of fate, every choice that led from doctor to patient, from helper to chaos incarnate, from devoted sidekick to independent force of nature. In the sprawling tapestry of human experience, few stories illuminate the profound connection between childhood trauma and adult pathology as starkly as the early years of Harley Frances Quinzel, the woman who would eventually transform into one of Gotham's most enigmatic figures. Her origins lie not in the sterile laboratories of mad science or the cosmic accidents that create so many of the world's most dangerous individuals, but rather in the mundane yet devastating dysfunction of an ordinary American family whose failures would echo through generations and ultimately reshape the very nature of chaos itself. The Quinzel household existed in a state of perpetual crisis that masqueraded as normalcy, a carefully constructed facade that concealed depths of dysfunction so profound that they would have challenged even the most experienced family therapists. Sharon Quinzel, Harlene's mother, struggled with alcoholism that manifested itself not in dramatic scenes of public intoxication, but rather in the slow, grinding erosion of maternal presence that left her daughter adrift in a world that demanded guidance she was incapable of providing. The bottles that Sharon hid throughout their modest home served as monuments to promises broken and responsibilities abandoned. Each empty vessel, a testament to the gradual dissolution of the bonds that should have provided stability and security during Harlene's most formative years. The patriarch of this troubled family, Nick Quinzel, represented a different but equally destructive form of parental failure. His identity was inextricably linked to a world of petty crime and compulsive gambling that placed the entire family in perpetual jeopardy, both financial and physical. The mob connections that he cultivated through his various illegal enterprises created an atmosphere of constant tension and underlying threat that permeated every aspect of their daily existence. His gambling addiction consumed not only the family's limited resources, but also his attention and emotional availability, leaving him present in body, but absent in all the ways that truly mattered to a developing child's psychological well-being. The extended family structure that might have provided some measure of stability and support instead offered only additional sources of conflict and disappointment. Harlene's grandparents, who had initially served as beloved figures in her young life, gradually grew to despise each other with a bitterness that poisoned family gatherings and eliminated what should have been a refuge from the chaos of her immediate household. Their deteriorating relationship served as a cruel preview of how love could transform into hatred, how the people who were supposed to provide unconditional support could become sources of additional stress and confusion. Perhaps the most devastating blow to Harlene's developing psyche came with the tragic death of her younger brother Barry during his teenage years. The circumstances surrounding his demise remain shrouded in the kind of ambiguity that often accompanies family tragedies, but the impact on Harlene was immediate and profound. Barry had represented not only a sibling but a connection to innocence and hope in a household where both commodities were in desperately short supply. His death eliminated the one relationship in her life that had been unmarked by the toxicity and dysfunction that characterized her interactions with her parents and extended family. The loss of Barry created a void in Harlene's emotional landscape that would never be adequately filled, leaving her with an insatiable hunger for connection and belonging that would later make her vulnerable to manipulation by those who understood how to exploit such desperate need. The grief she experienced was complicated by her family's inability to process tragedy in healthy ways, their own psychological limitations preventing them from providing the support and guidance she needed to navigate such profound loss during her formative years. Despite the chaos that surrounded her daily existence, Harley displayed early signs of exceptional intellectual capability that might have served as her salvation under different circumstances. Her academic performance consistently exceeded expectations, suggesting an innate intelligence that could have been nurtured into genuine achievement and professional success. Yet, even these gifts were tainted by the psychological instability that was already beginning to manifest itself in concerning ways. Early warning signs that went unrecognized or ignored by adults who were too consumed with their own problems to notice the developing pathology in the child they were supposed to protect and guide. The first clear indication of Harley's emerging psychological problems appeared in the form of an obsession with actor Frankie Muniz that transcended normal adolescent crushes to become something genuinely disturbing and potentially dangerous. Her fixation on this celebrity figure involved elaborate fantasies and plans that demonstrated a complete disconnect from reality and appropriate boundaries. She developed detailed schemes to kidnap Muniz, constructing scenarios in which she would deceive him about birth control in order to conceive his child, creating a fantasy relationship built upon lies, coercion, and violation of consent that revealed the depth of her distorted understanding of love and connection. This obsession with Frankie Muniz was not merely a passing phase or harmless celebrity worship, but rather a manifestation of deeper psychological issues that were developing in response to the trauma and neglect she had experienced throughout her childhood. Her need for connection had become so desperate and her understanding of healthy relationships so distorted that she was willing to contemplate criminal acts in pursuit of the fantasy of belonging and being loved. The fact that she saw nothing problematic about planning to deceive and manipulate another person into a sexual relationship demonstrated how thoroughly her moral compass had been corrupted by the dysfunction that surrounded her. When her family finally obtained a restraining order against their daughter, it represented both a recognition of the genuine danger she posed and a complete failure of the support systems that should have intervened much earlier to address the underlying issues that had created such disturbing behavior. The restraining order was not a therapeutic intervention, but rather a legal bandage applied to symptoms while ignoring the infected wound that continued to fester beneath the surface. Harley's disregard for this restraining order revealed the extent to which she had become disconnected from social norms and legal boundaries, her obsession overriding whatever remained of her capacity for rational decision-making and self-control. Her continued pursuit of Muniz, despite legal prohibitions, demonstrated a level of fixation that suggested genuine psychological pathology rather than simple teenage rebellion or poor judgment. The inevitable consequence of her persistent violation of the restraining order was her placement in juvenile detention, an experience that should have served as a wake-up call, but instead became another traumatic episode in a life already saturated with dysfunction and abandonment. The juvenile justice system, ill-equipped to address the complex psychological issues that had created her problematic behavior, treated her as a criminal rather than a victim of neglect and abuse, further reinforcing her sense of alienation from society and its institutions. During her time in juvenile detention, Harley encountered other troubled youth whose stories of trauma and abandonment mirrored her own experiences, creating a community of dysfunction that normalized pathological behavior rather than providing models for healthy coping and positive growth. The institutional environment, designed more for punishment than rehabilitation, failed to address the underlying issues that had led to her placement there, instead adding new layers of trauma and resentment to an already damaged psyche. The experience of being labeled a criminal and confined with other offenders served to further erode whatever remained of Harley's connection to conventional society and its values. Rather than learning to conform to social expectations and legal boundaries, She began to internalize the identity of an outsider and rebel, someone whose needs and desires were fundamentally incompatible with the demands of civilized behavior. Upon her release from juvenile detention, Harley appeared to have learned the necessary lessons about conformity and acceptable behavior, but beneath the surface, the same psychological issues continued to fester and grow. Her academic performance remained exceptional, providing her with the tools and credentials necessary to pursue higher education. Yet the underlying instability that had manifested itself in her obsession with Frankie Muniz remained unaddressed and unresolved. Her graduation as valedictorian should have been a moment of triumph and recognition for her intellectual achievements. Yet even this honor became an opportunity to express the rage and resentment that had been building throughout her educational experience. Rather than delivering a gracious speech thanking those who had supported her success, she used the platform to angrily denounce the entire school administration for their failures and shortcomings. The content of her valedictorian speech revealed the depth of her anger toward authority figures and institutions that she perceived as having failed her throughout her academic career. Her denunciation of the school administration was not merely criticism, but rather a bitter attack that suggested years of accumulated resentment and disappointment. She accused them of not helping her when she needed support and of betraying her trust in ways that had left lasting psychological scars. The public nature of her attack on the school administration demonstrated her willingness to use positions of trust and honor to express personal grievances and settle perceived scores, a pattern of behavior that would later manifest itself in much more dangerous ways. Her inability to separate her personal resentments from her professional responsibilities suggested a fundamental confusion about appropriate boundaries and ethical behavior that would have serious consequences in her future career as a mental health professional. The transition from high school to college represented an opportunity for Harley to escape the dysfunction of her family environment and create a new identity based on her considerable intellectual capabilities and professional ambitions. Her decision to pursue a career in psychiatry appeared to be motivated by genuine desire to understand and help others who struggled with mental health issues. Yet it also represented an unconscious attempt to understand and heal her own psychological wounds through the study of similar problems in others. Her dream of winning Olympic championship in gymnastics revealed another aspect of her personality, the drive for excellence and recognition that might have provided a healthy outlet for her competitive nature and need for achievement. The physical discipline and mental focus required for elite gymnastics could have served as positive coping mechanisms, providing structure and purpose that were lacking in other areas of her life. Yet even this dream was corrupted by the dysfunction of her family relationships, particularly her father's criminal priorities and complete disregard for her aspirations and well-being. When Nick Quinzel insisted that she deliberately lose an important competition so that he could win a long-shot bet to clear his gambling debts, he was asking her to sacrifice her own future for his immediate gratification, a request that demonstrated the profound selfishness and irresponsibility that had characterized his parenting throughout her childhood. The decision to comply with her father's request to take a dive represented a crucial moment in Harley's psychological development, a choice between her own integrity and her family's immediate demands. Her initial reluctance to throw the competition suggested that some part of her understood the moral implications of what she was being asked to do. Yet her ultimate compliance demonstrated the power of family loyalty and the distorted sense of obligation that had been instilled in her through years of dysfunction and manipulation. The moment when her father joked that there would never be a woman president, casually dismissing her dreams of political achievement and leadership, represented the final straw that broke whatever remained of her self-control and emotional regulation. This cruel remark, delivered in the aftermath of forcing her to sabotage her own athletic career, revealed the depth of his disregard for her ambitions and his fundamental inability to see her as an individual worthy of respect and support. Her violent assault on her father in front of witnesses marked a turning point in her relationship with authority and appropriate behavior, demonstrating that the rage and resentment that had been building throughout her childhood had reached a level where it could no longer be contained or channeled into acceptable outlets. The public nature of this attack, occurring in a crowded venue where others could witness her loss of control, suggested that her capacity for rational decision-making had been severely compromised by the intensity of her emotional response. The acrobatic skills she had developed through years of gymnastics training, which might have remained a source of pride and positive identity, were now revealed to have potential applications in violence and criminal activity. The same physical capabilities that could have brought her Olympic glory became tools for inflicting harm on those who had hurt her. A transformation that foreshadowed her future evolution into a figure capable of incredible physical prowess in service of chaotic and destructive purposes. The psychological profile that emerged from these formative experiences revealed a brilliant mind that had been systematically damaged by neglect, abuse, and exposure to dysfunction at every level of her development. Her intellectual capabilities remained intact and even exceptional, yet they existed alongside emotional instability, poor impulse control, and a distorted understanding of healthy relationships and appropriate boundaries. The pattern of seeking connection through obsession and manipulation, first visible in her stalking of Frankie Muniz, would become a recurring theme throughout her life, manifesting itself in increasingly dangerous ways as her intellectual capabilities and emotional neediness combined to create elaborate schemes for obtaining the love and acceptance she had never received from her family. Her willingness to contemplate and commit acts of deception and coercion in pursuit of emotional connection revealed a fundamental confusion about the nature of love and the meaning of consent that would have tragic consequences for both herself and others. The family dynamics that had shaped her development created a template for future relationships based on chaos, crisis, and emotional manipulation rather than stability, trust, and mutual respect. Her normal baseline had been established in an environment where love was conditional, support was inconsistent, and survival required constant vigilance and adaptation to changing threats and demands. The absence of healthy role models and stable relationships during her formative years left Harleen without the internal resources necessary to recognize and maintain appropriate boundaries in her future professional and personal relationships. She had learned to seek connection through intensity rather than intimacy, through crisis rather than comfort, through the familiar patterns of dysfunction that had defined her earliest experiences of human interaction. The seeds of her future transformation into Harley Quinn were already planted in the soil of her childhood trauma, waiting for the right combination of opportunity and manipulation to flourish into something that would threaten not only her own well-being but the safety and security of countless others. The brilliant mind that might have been humanity's gift to the field of mental health was instead being shaped into an instrument of chaos and destruction through the accumulated failures of every adult who had been entrusted with her care and protection. In understanding these origins, we begin to comprehend not merely how a doctor became a patient or how a healer became a source of harm, but rather how the fundamental human need for love and connection can be perverted into something dangerous when it encounters minds sophisticated enough to transform pain into power, abandonment into aggression, and desperate need into elaborate schemes for obtaining what should have been freely given in childhood. The tragedy of Harleen Quinzel begins not with her first encounter with the Joker, but with the systematic destruction of her capacity for healthy love that occurred long before she ever set foot in Arkham Asylum. The academic years that followed Harleen Quinzel's graduation from high school represented both the fulfillment of her intellectual potential and the systematic amplification of the psychological vulnerabilities that her dysfunctional, upbringing had created. Her pursuit of higher education in the field of psychiatry appeared to observers as a natural progression for someone with her exceptional analytical capabilities and apparent desire to understand human behavior. Yet beneath this laudable surface motivation lay darker currents that would ultimately transform her educational achievements into instruments of her own destruction and that of countless others. The university environment that welcomed Harleen provided her with the first stable institutional framework she had ever encountered, offering structure, clear expectations, and recognition for intellectual achievement that had been notably absent from her chaotic family life. The academic community embraced her obvious talents and rewarded her scholarly dedication with the kind of positive reinforcement that might have helped heal some of the psychological wounds inflicted during her formative years. Yet the damage that had been done ran too deep to be addressed through external validation alone. Her undergraduate coursework in psychology and pre-medical studies revealed both the scope of her intellectual gifts and the particular areas of fascination that would later prove so dangerous to her professional judgment and personal well-being. While her professors noted her exceptional grasp of complex theoretical concepts and her ability to synthesize information from diverse sources into coherent analytical frameworks, they also observed an intensity of focus that sometimes bordered on obsession, particularly when it came to case studies involving criminal psychology and abnormal behavior patterns. The transition from undergraduate study to graduate school in psychiatry marked a crucial phase in Harleen's development, as she moved from theoretical understanding of mental health issues to practical engagement with actual patients and real-world applications of psychological principles. The rigorous demands of medical school and psychiatric residency provided her with comprehensive training in diagnostic techniques, therapeutic interventions, and the ethical frameworks that govern professional practice in the mental health field. Yet even as she mastered the technical aspects of psychiatric medicine and demonstrated exceptional competence in clinical settings, the underlying psychological issues that had shaped her development continued to influence her choices and priorities in ways that would have profound consequences for her future career. Her selection of research topics and areas of specialization consistently gravitated toward the most extreme and dangerous forms of mental pathology, particularly those involving violence, manipulation, and the breakdown of normal social and moral constraints. The doctoral dissertation that would eventually serve as her calling card in the professional psychiatric community focused specifically on the Joker's pathology, an ambitious project that attempted to analyze and categorize the psychological profile of Gotham's most notorious criminal through exhaustive study of court records, police reports, and psychiatric evaluations conducted during his various periods of incarceration. The scope and depth of her research into this particular subject exceeded normal academic standards, suggesting a level of personal investment that went beyond scholarly curiosity into something approaching fascination. Her methodical analysis of the Joker's behavioral patterns, psychological triggers, and apparent motivational structures demonstrated both her exceptional analytical capabilities and her willingness to immerse herself completely in the study of criminal pathology without adequate regard for the psychological risks such intensive exposure might pose to her own mental health. The hundreds of hours she spent reviewing evidence of his crimes, studying transcripts of his statements, and attempting to construct coherent theoretical frameworks to explain his actions exposed her to levels of violence and depravity that would have challenged even experienced forensic psychiatrists. The academic framework within which she conducted this research provided a veneer of scientific objectivity that masked the deeply personal nature of her interest in the subject, allowing her to pursue what was essentially an obsession under the guise of scholarly investigation. Her professors, impressed by the thoroughness of her research and the sophistication of her analytical approach, failed to recognize the warning signs that such intense focus on a single criminal subject might represent an unhealthy fixation rather than legitimate academic inquiry. The theoretical models she developed to explain the Joker's behavior revealed both her considerable intellectual capabilities and the subtle ways in which prolonged exposure to his pathology had begun to influence her own thinking, patterns, and moral reasoning. Her analysis consistently sought to find underlying logic and coherent motivational structures within what appeared to others as random chaos and purposeless violence, suggesting that she was beginning to see patterns and meaning where others saw only madness and destruction. This academic work served multiple psychological functions for Harley, providing her with a socially acceptable outlet for her own fascination with transgression and boundary violations, while also offering the illusion that her interest was purely professional and scientific rather than personal and boundary violations. Potentially dangerous. The prestigious nature of doctoral research allowed her to pursue her growing obsession with the Joker while maintaining her reputation as a serious scholar and dedicated mental health professional. The completion of her dissertation represented the culmination of years of intensive study and analysis, producing a document that was simultaneously a masterpiece of psychological insight and a dangerous manifestation of unhealthy fixation. The academic community's positive reception of her work, including praise from respected figures in the field of forensic psychiatry, validated her approach and encouraged her to continue pursuing this particular area of specialization, despite the obvious risks it posed to her psychological well-being. Her presumption that this extensive research and her demonstrated expertise in analyzing the Joker's pathology would make her uniquely qualified to serve as his treating psychiatrist revealed the extent to which her academic success had inflated her confidence in her ability to handle situations that had defeated more experienced professionals. She interpreted her scholarly achievements as evidence that she possessed special insights and capabilities that would allow her to succeed where others had failed. A dangerous form of intellectual hubris that blinded her to the very real dangers she would face in direct clinical contact with her research subject. The application process for the position at Arkham Asylum provided her with an opportunity to present her qualifications and research to potential employers who were desperate enough to hire someone willing to take on the notoriously difficult and dangerous assignment of treating the Joker. Her academic credentials and specialized knowledge made her an attractive candidate for an institution that had struggled to find qualified professionals willing to work with their most dangerous and manipulative patients. Yet the institutional culture at Arkham Asylum was itself deeply problematic, reflecting decades of underfunding, administrative incompetence, and systemic failures that had transformed what should have been a cutting-edge treatment facility into something resembling a medieval dungeon with modern amenities. The staff members who interviewed Harley were more concerned with finding someone willing to accept the position than with ensuring that the candidate possessed the emotional stability and professional judgment necessary to handle such challenging work. Commissioner Gordon's later revelation about the true reasons for her hiring exposed the cynical calculations that had governed the selection process, demonstrating that her academic qualifications and research expertise had been far less important than her affordability and availability. The dismissive characterization of her as merely cheap and possessing a pulse and a skirt revealed the extent to which the institution had abandoned any pretense of prioritizing patient care or professional standards in favor of filling positions with warm bodies regardless of their actual suitability for the work. This revelation carried profound implications for understanding how institutional failures and systemic dysfunction could create conditions that placed vulnerable individuals in positions where their personal pathologies could cause maximum damage to both themselves and those they were ostensibly meant to serve. The fact that Arkham Asylum would hire someone primarily based on economic considerations rather than professional qualifications suggested that the institution itself had become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. The knowledge that her hiring had been motivated by desperation rather than recognition of her exceptional qualifications would have been devastating to someone whose self-worth was so deeply tied to academic achievement. And 12. Professional recognition. The casual dismissal of her scholarly accomplishments and the reduction of her identity to economic convenience and gender representation struck at the core of her professional self-image and personal value system. Yet even this humiliating revelation might have served as a warning signal that could have prompted her to reconsider her career path and seek positions in environments where her talents would be properly valued and her psychological well-being would be protected. The fact that she chose to proceed with the assignment, despite understanding the true nature of her selection, suggested that her need to engage with the Joker had become so powerful that it overrode rational considerations of professional dignity and personal safety. The institutional environment she entered at Arkham Asylum reflected decades of accumulated dysfunction and systemic failure that created ideal conditions for the kinds of boundary violations and ethical lapses that would ultimately lead to her transformation. The lack of adequate supervision, the absence of proper support systems, and the general atmosphere of desperation and barely controlled chaos provided a perfect storm of circumstances that would test the psychological resilience of even the most stable and well-adjusted professionals. The other staff members she encountered at Arkham displayed their own forms of psychological damage and professional compromise, creating a culture where deviation from normal standards and ethical guidelines had become normalized through necessity and institutional pressure. The guards, administrators, and fellow mental health professionals had all learned to cope with the impossible demands of their work environment by adopting various forms of psychological defense mechanisms that often involved emotional numbing and moral flexibility. This institutional culture of compromise and adaptation to impossible circumstances meant that the early warning signs of Harley's growing instability and boundary violations would likely be overlooked or rationalized away as necessary accommodations to the unique challenges of working with Arkham's patient population. The systemic dysfunction that had created these conditions in the first place continued to operate, ensuring that problems would be ignored or minimized until they reached crisis proportions. The philosophical questions raised by her academic research into criminal psychology took on new dimensions when she was faced with the prospect of actually implementing therapeutic interventions with real patients whose pathologies she had previously studied only in abstract theoretical terms. The transition from academic analysis to clinical practice required forms of emotional engagement and professional judgment that her scholarly preparation had not adequately developed, particularly when dealing with individuals whose manipulative capabilities exceeded normal parameters. Her extensive theoretical knowledge of the Joker's psychological profile and behavioral patterns created the illusion that she understood him in ways that would provide protection against his manipulative tactics. Yet this intellectual confidence was actually a source of vulnerability rather than strength. Her academic analysis had been conducted from a safe distance, using second-hand information and theoretical frameworks that allowed her to maintain emotional detachment and analytical objectivity. The prospect of direct clinical contact with the subject of her research represented a fundamental shift in the nature of their relationship, transforming him from an object of study into a living, breathing individual capable of responding to her presence and actively engaging with her attempts to understand and treat his condition. This transition from passive analysis to active intervention created opportunities for manipulation and psychological influence that her academic preparation had not anticipated or prepared her to handle. The ethical frameworks that govern psychiatric practice included numerous safeguards and guidelines designed to protect both patients and practitioners from the kinds of boundary violations and inappropriate relationships that could develop in therapeutic contexts. Yet these professional standards had been developed for normal clinical situations involving patients whose pathologies operated within predictable parameters, not for encounters with individuals whose manipulative capabilities and lack of normal moral constraints created unprecedented challenges. The institutional failures at Arkham Asylum meant that these ethical safeguards were poorly implemented and inadequately monitored, creating conditions where dangerous boundary violations could develop gradually without triggering the kinds of interventions and oversight that might have prevented their escalation into more serious problems. The combination of institutional dysfunction and individual psychological vulnerability created a perfect storm of circumstances that would ultimately lead to the destruction of everything Harleen had worked to achieve and become. The irony of her situation was that her exceptional academic preparation and extensive research into criminal psychology had actually increased her vulnerability rather than providing protection against the very dangers she thought she understood so well. Her scholarly confidence became a form of intellectual arrogance that blinded her to the limitations of theoretical knowledge when confronted with the reality of direct engagement with individuals whose pathologies exceeded the boundaries of normal human experience. The years of intensive study and academic achievement that had brought her to this point represented both the culmination of her intellectual development and the foundation for her eventual downfall, demonstrating how even the most impressive scholarly accomplishments could become instruments of destruction when they encountered the right combination of institutional dysfunction, personal vulnerability, and manipulative genius. Her transformation from promising young psychiatrist to dangerous criminal would begin not with dramatic corruption or sudden moral collapse, but with the gradual erosion of professional boundaries and ethical constraints that her academic preparation had not adequately prepared her to maintain under such extreme circumstances. The initial days of Harleen Quinzel's tenure at Arkham Asylum unfolded with the deceptive calm that often precedes the most catastrophic storms. As institutional routines and professional protocols created an illusion of normalcy that masked the profound dangers lurking beneath the surface of every interaction. Her orientation to the facility's procedures and patient population proceeded according to established guidelines. Yet even these mundane administrative processes contained warning signs that a more experienced or psychologically stable professional might have recognized as harbingers of the disasters to come. The first encounter that would prove pivotal to her eventual transformation occurred not with the Joker himself, but rather with another of Arkham's most notorious residents, the brilliant botanist turned eco-terrorist known as Poison Ivy. Dr. Pamela Isley's failed escape attempt provided Harleen with her initial glimpse into the brutal realities of institutional life at Arkham, where the thin veneer of medical professionalism barely concealed treatment methods that bordered on torture and abuse. The scene that unfolded before Harleen's horrified eyes revealed the systematic dehumanization that had become standard operating procedure within Arkham's walls. As guards responded to Ivy's escape attempt with levels of violence and sadistic pleasure that bore no resemblance to appropriate restraint techniques or therapeutic intervention, the electric prods, chemical restraints, and physical brutality employed against a woman whose crime had been seeking freedom from what amounted to indefinite imprisonment demonstrated the extent to which the institution had abandoned any pretense of rehabilitation in favor of pure containment and control. Ivy's subsequent sedation and the casual manner in which the guards discussed their treatment of her revealed a culture of systemic abuse that had become so normalized that staff members felt no need to conceal their actions or moderate their behavior in the presence of new personnel. The laughter and crude jokes that accompanied Ivy's suffering suggested that the guards had long since ceased to view their charges as human beings deserving of basic dignity and respect, instead treating them as objects of entertainment and targets for their own psychological pathologies. The profound disturbance that Harleen experienced while witnessing this treatment represented one of the few moments during her time at Arkham when her moral compass functioned correctly, pointing her toward appropriate outrage and ethical concern in response to clear violations of human dignity and professional standards. Her decision to approach Ivy's cell afterward to offer an apology demonstrated that some vestige of her original humanitarian motivations remained intact despite the corrosive atmosphere of the institution. Yet even this well-intentioned gesture revealed the naivety and lack of practical experience that would make her vulnerable to manipulation by more sophisticated predators within the facility. Her expectation that a simple apology would be welcomed or appreciated by someone who had just endured systematic brutality showed her fundamental misunderstanding of the psychological dynamics that governed relationships between staff and patients in such environments. Ivy's hostile response, her crude dismissal, and the symbolic act of spitting at the glass barrier that separated them served as both a rejection of Harleen's offered sympathy and a warning about the dangers of attempting to form personal connections across the professional boundaries that existed for crucial protective purposes. The venom in Ivy's reaction reflected not only her immediate anger and pain, but also the accumulated cynicism of someone who had learned through bitter experience that expressions of concern from staff members were more likely to be manipulative tactics than genuine gestures of compassion. This initial rebuff should have served as a valuable lesson about the importance of maintaining appropriate professional distance and the futility of attempting to establish personal relationships with patients whose psychological profiles made genuine connection impossible or dangerous. Instead, Harleen's response to Ivy's rejection suggested that her need for acceptance and emotional validation was so powerful that it could override rational assessment of appropriate boundaries and professional limitations. The transition from this disturbing introduction to Arkham's institutional culture to her first direct encounter with the Joker marked the beginning of the most dangerous phase of her professional career, as she moved from witnessing the effects of institutional dysfunction to becoming its primary target and eventual victim. The preparation for this meeting involved extensive briefings about the precautions and protocols that had been developed through the painful experience of previous staff members who had underestimated the scope of his manipulative capabilities and psychological insight. The warnings she received about the Joker's ability to exploit psychological vulnerabilities and identify emotional weaknesses should have served as adequate preparation for the challenges she would face. Yet her academic confidence and theoretical understanding of his pathology created a false sense of security that made her more vulnerable rather than less. Her belief that her extensive research and scholarly analysis had provided her with special insights into his psychological profile represented the kind of intellectual arrogance that often proves most dangerous when confronted with individuals whose capabilities exceed theoretical frameworks. The moment when she first entered his cell and discovered that he already knew her identity and had read her dissertation marked the beginning of a psychological chess match in which she was hopelessly outclassed despite her superior education and professional training. His dismissal of her academic work as equivalent to fan fiction represented both a devastating attack on her professional competence and a calculated attempt to destabilize her confidence in her own expertise and analytical capabilities. This casual destruction of years of scholarly work and academic achievement struck directly at the core of Harleen's identity and self-worth, undermining the very foundations upon which she had built her professional reputation and personal sense of value. The ease with which he dismissed her most significant intellectual accomplishment suggested that he understood her psychological vulnerabilities with an accuracy that her own self-analysis had never achieved. The alternating pattern of charm and threat that characterized his early interactions with her revealed the sophisticated nature of his manipulative strategy, as he demonstrated his ability to shift seamlessly between seduction and intimidation in ways that kept her constantly off balance and unable to establish stable emotional or intellectual footing. This psychological whiplash effect was designed to break down her resistance and create the kind of emotional dependence that would make her increasingly susceptible to his influence and control. Her decision to disregard established protocols by requesting access to his cell represented the first serious breach of professional boundaries that would ultimately lead to her complete corruption and transformation. The rationalization she provided for this dangerous deviation from safety procedures demonstrated how her academic hubris and desperate need for validation had begun to override the practical wisdom embedded in institutional safeguards, developed through years of tragic experience. The acrobatic display she performed to evade his physical advances, while earning his begrudging admiration, also revealed the extent to which she was willing to transform professional interactions into personal performances designed to win approval and recognition from someone whose opinion should have been irrelevant to her sense of self-worth. The fact that she derived satisfaction from impressing a dangerous criminal with skills that had nothing to do with her therapeutic role suggested that her priorities had already begun to shift in dangerous directions. The reprimands she received from Commissioner Gordon and District Attorney Harvey Dent following this breach of protocol should have served as a crucial wake-up call about the trajectory of her professional behavior and the risks she was assuming through her inappropriate engagement with the Joker. Their warnings about the dangers of such conduct reflected not only institutional concerns about liability and safety, but also genuine attempts to protect her from the psychological manipulation that had destroyed previous professionals who had made similar errors in judgment. Yet her response to these warnings suggested that she had already begun to internalize the Joker's perspective on authority figures and institutional constraints, viewing them as obstacles to her special mission rather than as protective measures designed to preserve her psychological integrity and professional effectiveness. The seeds of her eventual rebellion against all forms of external control and moral limitation were already being planted through his careful cultivation of her resentment toward those who sought to restrict her access to him. The second opportunity she received to extract information from the Joker, following Batman's failed attempts at interrogation, represented both a chance for professional redemption and an even greater danger of psychological corruption. The institutional desperation that led to giving her another chance despite her previous protocol violations revealed how thoroughly the system had failed to develop effective methods for dealing with his unique combination of protocolations: intelligence, charisma, and complete absence of moral constraints. The insights she gleaned from her brief interactions with Poison Ivy, particularly Ivy's inadvertent hints about the Joker's troubled childhood, provided her with what appeared to be the key to unlocking his psychological defenses and achieving the therapeutic breakthrough that had eluded all previous attempts. This information represented both a valuable therapeutic tool and a dangerous weapon that could be used to manipulate her own emotions and assumptions about his fundamental nature and potential for change. Her decision to leverage this knowledge by probing the Joker's family history and attempting to elicit emotional responses through discussion of his past traumas demonstrated both sophisticated clinical technique and profound naivety about the risks of emotional engagement with someone whose entire identity was built upon the destruction of normal human connections and moral boundaries. The apparent success of this approach, evidenced by the rare emotional responses she was able to provoke, created the illusion that she was achieving genuine therapeutic progress when in fact she was being systematically manipulated and psychologically compromised. The moment when he divulged the bomb's location in response to her skillful psychological pressure represented the pinnacle of her professional achievement at Arkham, providing her with concrete evidence that her methods were effective and that her special insights into his psychology were producing results that justified the risks she had assumed. The gratitude she felt for being able to contribute meaningfully to public safety and the validation she received from successfully extracting crucial information created a powerful psychological reward that reinforced her belief in the fate and appropriateness of her unorthodox methods. Her decision to revisit Poison Ivy and present her with a flower as a token of appreciation revealed the genuine warmth and capacity for connection that still existed within her psyche, despite the corrupting influence of her engagement with the Joker. This simple gesture of gratitude and recognition represented one of the few purely positive interactions she experienced during her time at Arkham, creating a foundation for what might have become a healthy and supportive professional relationship under different circumstances. The revelation that the Joker's confession had been an elaborate deception, designed to mislead authorities and provide cover for his true escape plan, represented a devastating blow to her professional confidence and personal sense of competence. The realization that she had been so thoroughly manipulated despite her extensive preparation and theoretical understanding of his psychology forced her to confront the possibility that her academic achievements had been worthless when, faced with the reality of his genius for deception and psychological manipulation. The explosion in the cafeteria that accompanied his escape attempt demonstrated the lethal consequences of his planning and the extent to which he was willing to sacrifice innocent lives in pursuit of his goals. The fact that he had orchestrated this violence while simultaneously engaging in what appeared to be genuine therapeutic dialogue with her revealed the depth of his duplicity and his complete absence of moral constraints or human empathy. His use of her as a human shield during the escape attempt represented the ultimate expression of contempt for her person and her professional role, reducing her from a treatment provider to a mere tool for his survival and eventual freedom. The casual manner in which he endangered her life while maintaining the pretense of their special relationship demonstrated that any connection she believed existed between them was entirely one-sided and based upon her own psychological needs rather than any genuine regard on his part. Harvey Dent's order to shoot them both, despite her presence as an innocent hostage, revealed the extent to which institutional desperation and fear had corrupted normal decision-making processes and ethical considerations. The willingness to sacrifice her life in order to prevent the Joker's escape demonstrated that she had become expendable in the eyes of those who had once valued her contributions and professional capabilities. Poison Ivy's intervention to save her life, deflecting the bullet and ensnaring the Joker in her vines, represented the first genuine act of protection and care that Harleen had experienced since her arrival at Arkham. This selfless gesture, performed by someone who had initially rejected her overtures of sympathy and connection, revealed that authentic human bonds could still form even within the toxic environment of the institution. The Joker's confusion about Ivy's motives for saving Harleen, his inability to comprehend why someone would risk their own safety for another person without obvious benefit or reward, highlighted the fundamental absence of human understanding and emotional capacity that made him such a dangerous and unpredictable opponent. His genuine bewilderment at this display of altruism revealed the extent to which normal human motivations and relationships were incomprehensible to his pathological worldview. Ivy's simple explanation that nobody had ever given her a gift, particularly something as meaningful as a living plant, illuminated the profound loneliness and isolation that characterized the existence of even the most dangerous residents of Arkham. Her emotional response to Harleen's small gesture of kindness demonstrated that beneath the layers of psychological damage and criminal behavior, the capacity for human connection and gratitude still existed. The moment when Ivy surrendered to prevent further bloodshed ensuring that both she and the Joker would be recaptured without additional violence or loss of life, revealed a moral sophistication and concern for others that contrasted sharply with the Joker's complete disregard for collateral damage and innocent victims. This act of self-sacrifice established Ivy as someone whose criminal activities were motivated by principles and beliefs rather than mere sadism or chaos. Harleen's decision to reject Harvey Dent's offer of a promotion in the aftermath of these events, expressing her disdain through a defiant and crude dismissal, marked a crucial turning point in her relationship with institutional authority and conventional professional advancement. Her willingness to sacrifice career opportunities in favor of maintaining her integrity and autonomy suggested that her experiences had begun to change her fundamental priorities and values. The deepening bond that developed between Harleen and Ivy during the subsequent months represented the formation of the first genuinely healthy relationship either woman had experienced within the walls of Arkham. Harleen's unique ability to penetrate Ivy's emotional barriers and provide the kind of therapeutic support that actually facilitated healing and growth demonstrated that her skills as a mental health professional could be extraordinarily effective when applied with genuine compassion and respect for patient autonomy. The Valentine's Day visit, during which Harleen brought pilfered chocolate milk and recounted the plot of Shrek 2, revealed the playful and nurturing aspects of her personality that had survived despite the corrupting influences of her institutional environment. This simple act of kindness and companionship provided Ivy with what may have been her first experience of unconditional acceptance and care, creating the foundation for a relationship that transcended the normal boundaries between doctor and patient. The endurance of their friendship, despite Harleen's deepening involvement with the Joker, testified to the authentic nature of their connection and Ivy's genuine concern for her colleagues' well-being. The warnings and advice that Ivy attempted to provide about the dangers of emotional engagement with such a manipulative and destructive individual represented attempts to protect someone she had come to value and care about, even as those warnings went largely unheeded. The final manipulation that led to Harleen's transformation occurred when the Joker exploited her accumulated vulnerabilities and psychological wounds to convince her that leaping into a vat of acid would represent the ultimate expression of their connection and the final step in her evolution from conventional psychiatric professional to something unprecedented and powerful. The tragic irony of this moment was that her extensive academic preparation and clinical experience had provided her with all the knowledge necessary to recognize the manipulation, yet her emotional needs and psychological damage made her incapable of applying that knowledge to protect herself from the very fate she had studied so extensively in others. The transformation of Harleen Quinzel from respected psychiatric professional into the chaotic entity known as Harley Quinn represented not a sudden corruption, but rather the culmination of a carefully orchestrated psychological campaign that exploited every vulnerability that her traumatic past had created while simultaneously offering the illusion of healing and acceptance that her damaged psyche so desperately craved. The months that followed her initial encounters with both Poison Ivy and the Joker revealed the profound complexity of human relationships formed under extreme circumstances, where genuine connection coexisted with manipulation, where authentic care battled against systematic exploitation, and where the fundamental human need for love became both salvation and damnation. The deepening bond between Harleen and Poison Ivy during this period represented perhaps the only genuinely healthy relationship that either woman had ever experienced, built upon foundations of mutual respect, intellectual equality, and authentic emotional connection, rather than the power dynamics and psychological manipulation that characterized most interactions within Arkham's walls. Their friendship transcended the normal boundaries between doctor and patient, evolving into something that resembled sisterhood more than any professional relationship. with each woman finding in the other a kindred spirit who understood the particular forms of isolation and misunderstanding that brilliant women often faced in a world that feared their capabilities. The Valentine's Day encounter that would become legendary among those who witnessed it revealed both the playful spontaneity that still existed within Harleen's personality and her intuitive understanding of what would bring genuine joy to someone whose existence had been marked by constant rejection and hostility from those around her. The pilfered chocolate milk represented more than simple contraband. It was a symbol of rebellion against institutional restrictions, and a gesture of care that acknowledged Ivy's humanity in ways that official treatment protocols never could. The recounting of Shrek 2's plot, delivered with theatrical enthusiasm and genuine delight in the act of storytelling, provided Ivy with something she had perhaps never experienced before: the simple pleasure of shared entertainment and companionship without ulterior motives or hidden agendas. This moment of pure human connection, unmarked by the power struggles and psychological warfare that defined most relationships within Arkham, created a sanctuary of normalcy and warmth that both women treasured despite the dangerous environment that surrounded them. The endurance of their friendship throughout the increasingly troubled months that followed testified to the authentic nature of their bond, and Ivy's growing concern for Harleen's psychological well-being as she became more deeply involved with the Joker's psychological games and manipulative strategies. Ivy's attempts to warn her friend about the dangers of emotional engagement with such a fundamentally destructive individual represented genuine caring and protective instinct, even as those warnings fell upon ears that had been carefully conditioned to interpret such concern as jealousy or misunderstanding. Yet, even as this healthy relationship provided Harleen with moments of genuine peace and authentic connection, the parallel development of her obsession with the Joker created an increasingly unstable psychological foundation that made her vulnerable to manipulation techniques that were far more sophisticated than anything she had encountered in her academic study of criminal psychology. The Joker's approach to her corruption was not crude or obvious, but rather subtle and systematic, designed to exploit her specific psychological vulnerabilities while creating the illusion that she was the one in control of their interactions. His recognition of her desperate need for intellectual validation and professional recognition led him to craft elaborate scenarios in which her therapeutic insights and analytical capabilities appeared to be achieving breakthrough results that had eluded all previous attempts at treatment. These carefully orchestrated moments of apparent success created powerful psychological rewards that reinforced her belief in the special nature of their connection while simultaneously deepening her emotional investment in his well-being and progress. The manipulation was particularly insidious because it built upon genuine aspects of her professional competence and analytical capabilities, creating a foundation of authentic achievement that made the deceptive elements more difficult to recognize and resist. Her ability to elicit emotional responses from someone who had remained impervious to all previous therapeutic attempts represented real skill and insight. Yet these genuine accomplishments were being systematically exploited to create emotional dependence and psychological vulnerability. The gradual erosion of her professional boundaries occurred so slowly and subtly that she was able to rationalize each individual compromise as a necessary adaptation to the unique circumstances of his case, rather than recognizing the Fessersley 2014 cumulative pattern of increasing psychological engagement and emotional investment. Her extensive academic knowledge of boundary violations and their dangers became ironically useless because she was able to convince herself that her superior understanding of his psychology exempted her from the normal risks that such engagement might pose. The Joker's genius lay not in crude seduction or obvious manipulation, but rather in his ability to make her feel that she was the one making choices and maintaining control, even as he systematically dismantled every psychological bifade Arfie's defense and professional safeguard that might have protected her from his influence. He transformed her strengths into weaknesses, her intelligence into a tool for self-deception, and her compassion into a weapon that could be used against her own well-being and moral integrity. The months of this psychological campaign created a complex web of genuine connection mixed with calculated exploitation, authentic moments of breakthrough complicated by systematic deception, and real therapeutic progress undermined by hidden agendas that served his ultimate goal of complete psychological domination. The tragedy was that her skills as a mental health professional were genuinely helping him in certain ways, providing insights and therapeutic interventions that had positive effects on his psychological state. Yet these real accomplishments were being used to justify increasing levels of emotional engagement and boundary violation. The institutional failures at Arkham created perfect conditions for this systematic corruption to proceed undetected and unchallenged. As the desperate need for any kind of progress with such a dangerous and high-profile patient made administrators reluctant to question methods that appeared to be producing results. The lack of adequate supervision and peer consultation meant that the warning signs of her increasing psychological compromise went unrecognized until they had progressed far beyond the point where intervention might have been effective. Her transformation into someone who could rationalize increasingly extreme actions in service of what she believed to be therapeutic goals revealed how sophisticated manipulation could corrupt even the most well-intentioned and highly trained professionals when it encountered the right combination of personal vulnerability and institutional dysfunction. The process was so gradual and carefully orchestrated that she was able to maintain her self-image as a competent professional even as her actual behavior diverged increasingly from accepted standards and ethical guidelines. The psychological mechanisms that the Joker employed to achieve this corruption drew upon decades of experience in manipulating authority figures and exploiting the psychological vulnerabilities of those who sought to help or control him. His understanding of human psychology was not academic but practical, born from countless encounters with mental health professionals, law enforcement officers, and other authority figures who had underestimated his capabilities and fallen victim to his systematic exploitation of their weaknesses and blind spots. The particular vulnerabilities that Harley presented were especially attractive to someone whose entire existence was built upon the destruction of normal human connections and moral boundaries. As her combination of intellectual brilliance, emotional neediness, and professional authority created opportunities for psychological manipulation that exceeded even his considerable experience. Her academic knowledge of his pathology provided him with detailed information about how she understood his psychology, allowing him to craft deceptions and manipulations that specifically targeted her theoretical frameworks and analytical approaches. The systematic erosion of her connection to reality and normal human relationships occurred through a process that resembled addiction more than traditional forms of corruption. As each interaction with him provided psychological rewards that became increasingly necessary for her sense of competence and self-worth. The intermittent reinforcement schedule he employed, alternating between validation and rejection, created a powerful psychological dependency that made her increasingly desperate for his approval and recognition. The final manipulation that led to her physical transformation represented the culmination of months of careful psychological preparation, as he convinced her that leaping into a vat of acid would represent the ultimate expression of their connection and her final evolution into someone worthy of his attention and respect. The tragic irony was that this moment of apparent choice was actually the inevitable result of systematic psychological conditioning that had eliminated her capacity for rational decision-making regarding anything that involved their relationship. The chemical transformation that followed her leap into the acid was merely the external manifestation of psychological changes that had already occurred over the preceding months, as her identity as Dr. Pre. Harley Quinzel had been gradually replaced by something new and fundamentally different. The physical alteration of her appearance provided a concrete symbol of the internal transformation that had already taken place, marking the death of her former self and the birth of something that would become known as Harley Quinn. The aftermath of this transformation revealed the true nature of their relationship and the extent to which her understanding of their connection had been based upon illusion and self-deception rather than genuine reciprocal feeling or respect. The humiliations she endured at events like the annual Villiers Awards, where she was consistently marginalized and denied the recognition that should have accompanied their supposed partnership, demonstrated that her transformation had been designed to serve his needs rather than create genuine equality or mutual benefit. His refusal to allow her to join him on stage or deliver acceptance speeches revealed that despite her complete sacrifice of identity and autonomy in service of their relationship, he still viewed her as fundamentally subordinate and unworthy of equal treatment or recognition. The fact that he would attend important events with other associates while leaving her behind demonstrated that her transformation had not earned her the respect and partnership she had believed it would provide. The psychological impact of this realization was devastating, yet also liberating, as it forced her to confront the reality that her sacrifice had been based upon false promises and manipulated expectations rather than genuine commitment or authentic connection. The recognition that she had been systematically deceived and exploited created the foundation for the anger and resentment that would eventually fuel her desire for independence and revenge. The pattern of abuse and manipulation that characterized their relationship after her transformation revealed how completely her judgment had been compromised and her understanding of healthy relationships had been distorted by the trauma of her conversion experience. Her ability to rationalize his treatment of her and find excitement in what others recognized as clear signs of psychological abuse demonstrated the depth of the conditioning she had undergone and the extent to which her normal, emotional responses had been perverted. The 3 months she spent in Arkham, following his abandonment of her during a criminal enterprise, provided her with the first opportunity since her transformation to experience extended separation from his direct influence and psychological manipulation. The isolation and enforced reflection that imprisonment provided created conditions where the systematic brainwashing she had undergone could begin to weaken and her natural intelligence could reassert itself in evaluating the reality of their relationship. Poison Ivy's consistent attempts to help her recognize the abusive nature of her relationship with the Joker represented both genuine friendship and professional insight. As Ivy understood from her own experiences with manipulation and exploitation how difficult it could be to recognize and escape from such systematically destructive relationships. Her warnings were not motivated by jealousy or rivalry, but by authentic concern for someone whose friendship had provided meaning and connection during the darkest periods of her own incarceration. The psychological journey that Harleen undertook during those months of imprisonment revealed both the depth of the damage that had been done to her capacity for rational thought and the resilience of the brilliant mind that still existed beneath layers of conditioning and trauma. The gradual process of recognizing and acknowledging the reality of her situation required her to confront not only the extent of her victimization, but also her own complicity in the destruction of everything she had once valued and achieved. The moment when she finally accepted the truth about the nature of their relationship and made the decision to sever all ties with the Joker represented both the end of one phase of her existence and the beginning of something unprecedented and dangerous. The woman who emerged from that period of reflection and recognition was neither Dr. Harleen Quinzel nor the submissive sidekick Harley Quinn, but rather something new and potentially more dangerous than either of her previous incarnations had been. The transition from victim to independent agent of chaos marked the true birth of the figure who would become one of Gotham's most unpredictable and formidable criminals, someone whose combination of intellectual brilliance, psychological insight, physical capabilities, and complete freedom from normal moral constraints would make her a unique threat to the established order. Her transformation was complete not when she leaped into the acid, but when she finally recognized the truth about what had been done to her and chose to embrace her own power rather than continue serving someone else's vision of what she should become. The moment of ultimate betrayal that would shatter the last remnants of Harley's delusions about her relationship with the Joker arrived with the cold precision of a surgeon's scalpel, cutting through months of accumulated self-deception and revealing truths so devastating that they would fundamentally alter not only her understanding of their connection, but her entire relationship with reality itself. The Riddler's elaborate trap, designed to force impossible choices upon those caught within its mechanical embrace, created the perfect laboratory conditions for exposing the authentic nature of bonds that had been built upon foundations of manipulation, exploitation, and systematic psychological abuse. The ultimatum, presented by Edward Nygma, was elegantly simple in its construction yet profound in its implications, offering the Joker a choice between saving Batman, his eternal nemesis, and the one relationship that truly defined his existence, or protecting Harley Quinn, the devoted follower who had sacrificed everything in service of what she believed to be their great love. The scenario was designed to reveal priorities and loyalties through action rather than rhetoric, stripping away the comfortable lies and elaborate rationalizations that allowed toxic relationships to persist even in the face of mounting evidence of their destructive nature. The Joker's decision, made with the casual indifference that characterized all his interactions with human suffering, represented the culmination of everything that Poison Ivy had tried to warn Harleen about during their months of friendship and professional collaboration within Arkham's walls. His choice to spare Batman while allowing Harley to face what appeared to be certain death in a pool of acid demonstrated with crystalline clarity that their supposed partnership had always been a carefully constructed illusion designed to serve his psychological needs rather than create genuine mutual benefit or authentic emotional connection. The moments that followed this betrayal unfolded with the surreal quality of nightmare logic. As Harley tumbled toward what she believed would be her death while experiencing a series of revelations that systematically dismantled every assumption she had made about their relationship and her own transformation. The presence of Dr. Quinzel as a guiding voice during this crisis represented the return of her original analytical capabilities and professional insight, abilities that had been suppressed and distorted during months of systematic psychological manipulation but had never been completely destroyed. The realization that the Joker's supposed marriage proposal had been nothing more than an elaborate ruse created a cascading series of understanding that revealed the depth and sophistication of his deception. The diamond ring that she had treasured as a symbol of their eternal commitment was exposed as a grenade ring, a weapon designed not to demonstrate love but to manipulate Batman's protective instincts and create the conditions for her rescue by someone other than her supposed beloved. This revelation struck at the very core of her identity as Harley Quinn, for the proposal had represented the moment when she believed their relationship had transcended mere partnership to become something approaching genuine romantic love. The discovery that this pivotal memory was built upon lies and manipulation forced her to re-examine every other interaction and gesture that she had interpreted as evidence of his caring and commitment to their shared future. The phrase that had sealed her commitment to him, "Till death do us part," revealed its true meaning in the context of this betrayal, showing that it had never been a pledge of eternal devotion, but rather a casual assumption that their association would end with her demise. The wedding imagery that had filled her imagination with dreams of permanent union was exposed as macabre foreshadowing of her intended fate. a psychological manipulation so cruel and calculated that it demonstrated the complete absence of human empathy or moral consideration in his treatment of her devotion. The awakening that followed this series of revelations brought with it not only understanding of past deceptions, but also clarity about the Joker's true emotional priorities and psychological attachments. The recognition that his affections were directed entirely toward Batman rather than toward her represented perhaps the most psychologically devastating aspect of the entire betrayal, as it revealed that she had been competing unknowingly for attention and affection that were already completely claimed by someone else. This triangulated relationship dynamic explained so many of the inconsistencies and painful moments that she had experienced but rationalized away during their time together. From his obvious excitement and energy during encounters with Batman to his distracted disinterest during periods when the Dark Knight was absent from their criminal enterprises. The realization that she had been functioning as an unwitting prop in his courtship of his true obsession transformed every memory of their collaboration into something tainted and humiliating. Poison Ivy's intervention to rescue her from the acid, accompanied by the revelation that the deadly pool was actually filled with margarita mix as part of the Riddler's elaborate psychological experiment, provided both physical salvation and the final piece of evidence needed to understand the complete scope of the deception that had been perpetrated against her. The fact that her supposed beloved had been willing to let her believe she was dying horribly while he pursued his real interests demonstrated a level of callousness that exceeded even her worst fears about his capacity for cruelty. The margarita mix revelation, while providing relief that she had not actually been in mortal danger, also highlighted the collaborative nature of her manipulation, showing that others had been involved in creating the circumstances that would finally open her eyes to the reality of her situation. The Riddler's role in orchestrating this moment of truth suggested that even other criminals recognized the abusive nature of her relationship and felt compelled to intervene in ways that her supposed friends and colleagues had been unable to accomplish through direct confrontation. The decision to sever all ties with the Joker that emerged from this cascade of revelations represented not merely an emotional response to betrayal, but a fundamental reclamation of her agency and identity after months of systematic and psychological subjugation. The clarity that accompanied this choice reflected the return of analytical capabilities that had been suppressed during her period of devoted service, as her natural intelligence reasserted itself once the fog of manipulation and emotional dependency had been lifted. The resolve to pursue independent criminal endeavors marked the birth of something unprecedented in Gotham's landscape of villainy, a figure who possessed all the intellectual capabilities and professional insights of Dr. Dealey. Harley Quinzel, combined with the physical abilities and freedom from moral constraints that had been acquired during her transformation into Harley Quinn, yet was now liberated from the submissive role that had prevented her from fully utilizing these combined assets. The kidnapping of the mayor and the demand for a highway to be named in her honor represented both a symbolic claiming of public recognition and a practical demonstration of her ability to execute complex criminal operations without assistance or supervision from her former mentor. The choice of target and the specific nature of her demands revealed sophisticated understanding of political dynamics and media manipulation that drew upon her academic knowledge of psychology while demonstrating complete confidence in paperless. Her ability to operate independently. The physical transformation that accompanied her psychological liberation involved more than simple changes in costume and appearance, extending to fundamental alterations in posture, movement, and self-presentation that reflected her evolution from submissive sidekick to independent agent of chaos. The shedding of the original Harley Quinn identity that had been designed to please and serve others marked the emergence of someone who would define her own goals and methods rather than accepting roles assigned by those who sought to use her capabilities for their own purposes. The confrontation with the Joker in his lair represented the formal termination of their professional and personal relationship, providing her with an opportunity to demonstrate both her enhanced capabilities and her complete psychological independence from his influence and control. The refusal to accept his attempts at reconciliation revealed that her transformation was not merely emotional but also intellectual, reflecting a clear-eyed assessment of what their relationship had actually been and what it could never become. The battle that ensued when he ordered his henchmen to eliminate her served as both a test of her individual capabilities and a symbolic representation of her complete break from everything he represented and had tried to make her become. The fact that she emerged victorious from this confrontation while sparing his life demonstrated that her evolution had included the development of moral principles and strategic thinking that transcended simple revenge or emotional reaction. The decision to trap him beneath the wreckage of his own stronghold while choosing not to kill him revealed sophisticated understanding of psychological warfare and long-term strategic planning that exceeded anything she had demonstrated during their period of collaboration. The choice to let him live while destroying his base of operations sent a clear message about power dynamics and future expectations, while also preserving the possibility of future interactions on terms that she would define rather than accept. Her declaration of intent to assume control over the city reflected both ambition that had been liberated from artificial constraints and confidence in her ability to succeed where others had failed through the application of capabilities that had been developed and refined during months of systematic training and experience. The prospect of the Joker witnessing her ascension to power while being powerless to prevent or participate in it represented the ultimate reversal of their previous dynamic and a fitting response to the betrayals and humiliations she had endured. The psychological complexity of this moment of triumph was enhanced by her recognition that mercy, rather than revenge, represented the most devastating response to his betrayal, demonstrating growth and maturity that transcended the simple emotional reactions that had characterized her earlier responses to conflict and disappointment. The ability to choose restraint from a position of power showed that her transformation had included the development of wisdom and strategic thinking, rather than merely enhanced physical capabilities and criminal skills. The emergence from this confrontation as someone completely transformed, yet fundamentally intact, represented perhaps the most remarkable aspect of her entire journey, from respected professional to criminal mastermind. As she had managed to retain the essential core of her identity and values while shedding the psychological vulnerabilities and professional constraints that had made her susceptible to exploitation and manipulation. The watching world would soon discover that the woman who had once been Dr. Harley Quinn and had briefly served as the Joker's devoted sidekick had evolved into something unprecedented and potentially more dangerous than either of her previous incarnations. Someone whose combination of intellectual brilliance, professional insight, physical capabilities, and complete freedom from conventional moral and legal constraints would reshape the landscape of criminal enterprise in ways that no one could fully anticipate or prepare for. The birth of the independent Harley Quinn marked not just the end of one toxic relationship, but the beginning of something that would challenge every assumption about the nature of criminal psychology. The possibilities of personal transformation and the ultimate destination of brilliant minds that had been systematically damaged, yet had somehow found the strength to heal themselves and emerge stronger than ever before. The emergence of Harley Quinn as an independent force in Gotham's criminal underworld required more than mere liberation from the Joker's psychological control. It demanded the systematic construction of an entirely new identity and operational framework that would allow her to translate her formidable intellectual capabilities and hard-won practical experience into sustainable criminal enterprise. The months that followed her dramatic break from her former mentor represented a period of unprecedented experimentation and growth, as she discovered that freedom from external control brought with it both exhilarating possibilities and daunting responsibilities that tested every aspect of her psychological resilience and strategic acumen. The initial attempts to establish herself as a solo operative revealed the extent to which her previous success had been dependent upon the Joker's established reputation and extensive network of criminal contacts. Support systems that were no longer available to someone who had declared open rebellion against his authority and influence. The criminal underworld of Gotham operated according to complex social hierarchies and unwritten codes that had evolved over decades of conflict and collaboration, creating barriers to entry that were particularly formidable for someone whose previous identity had been defined primarily by association with another, more established figure. Her first independent heist, an ambitious attempt to steal a nuclear device that required both technical expertise and considerable physical courage, ended in humiliating failure when the Joker and his associates intervened to thwart her efforts and demonstrate their continued superiority over her supposedly enhanced capabilities. The ease with which they disrupted her carefully planned operation revealed that individual talent and determination, however exceptional, were insufficient to compete against organized opposition that possessed superior resources and institutional knowledge. The failure of this initial venture forced Harley to confront uncomfortable truths about the realities of criminal enterprise and the importance of collaborative relationships in achieving ambitious goals. Her academic background had emphasized individual achievement and personal excellence, while her time as the Joker's sidekick had provided her with extensive practical experience without requiring her to develop the leadership and organizational skills necessary for independent operation. The recognition that she needed to assemble her own crew represented a fundamental shift in her understanding of criminal enterprise and her own role within it. As she transitioned from being a highly capable subordinate to becoming a leader responsible for the welfare and success of others. This evolution required her to develop entirely new skills related to recruitment, motivation, and team management, while also learning to navigate the complex interpersonal dynamics that characterized relationships between criminals who had chosen to work together despite their individual capabilities and independent ambitions. Poison Ivy's continued attempts to dissuade her from pursuing this path reflected genuine concern for her friend's well-being and realistic assessment of the dangers involved in establishing an independent criminal operation without adequate preparation or support. Ivy's warnings were not motivated by lack of confidence in Harley's capabilities, but rather by understanding of the systemic obstacles and institutional resistance that would inevitably arise to challenge any attempt to disrupt with commons, established power structures and territorial arrangements. The search for suitable collaborators led Harley into the shadowy world of marginalized villains and rejected criminals, individuals whose talents had been overlooked or dismissed by more established organizations due to personal quirks, social awkwardness, or failure to conform to conventional expectations about professional behavior and criminal methodology. This population of outcasts and misfits represented an untapped resource of considerable potential. Individuals whose unique capabilities could be extremely valuable when properly coordinated and directed toward appropriate objectives. Dr. Psycho emerged as the first member of her nascent organization, a figure whose powerful telepathic abilities had been overshadowed by personal issues and social problems that had led to his expulsion from the Legion of Doom, despite his considerable supernatural capabilities. His recruitment represented both an opportunity and a challenge, as his powers could provide enormous tactical advantages, while his psychological instability and interpersonal difficulties created management problems that required careful attention and diplomatic handling. The decision to welcome Clayface into her growing crew reflected her understanding that effective criminal operations required diverse skill sets and capabilities that no single individual could provide. Regardless of their personal talents or professional experience, his shape-shifting abilities offered unique possibilities for infiltration, deception, and tactical surprise that could compensate for their organization's lack of conventional resources and established connections within Gotham's criminal community. The inaugural heist that targeted Maxie Zeus served multiple strategic purposes beyond simple financial gain, as it provided her new team with practical experience working together while also sending a clear message to the broader criminal community about their capabilities and intentions. The choice of target was particularly significant, as Zeus represented the kind of established criminal figure whose dismissive attitude toward female villains and unconventional criminal methods embodied the institutional prejudices that had motivated Harley's decision to establish an independent operation. The execution of this operation revealed both the potential strengths and inherent weaknesses of her newly assembled team, as their diverse capabilities created opportunities for creative problem-solving and tactical innovation, while their lack of experience working together led to coordination difficulties and communication problems that nearly compromised the entire mission. Clayface's theatrical background proved invaluable for creating diversions and maintaining operational security, while Dr. Psycho's telepathic abilities allowed for precise timing and tactical coordination that conventional criminal organizations could not achieve. The confrontation with Maxie Zeus himself provided Harley with her first opportunity to demonstrate her evolved capabilities and leadership philosophy to both her team members and the broader criminal community, as she demanded public acknowledgement of their prowess while using both psychological manipulation and physical force to achieve her objectives. The brutal nature of her assault on Zeus, culminating in her own direct participation in his beating, established her reputation for personal courage and willingness to engage in violence when necessary to protect her organization's interests and reputation. The aftermath of this successful operation, which forced Zeus to publicly acknowledge their capabilities and effectiveness, provided Harley's crew with the credibility and recognition necessary to begin establishing themselves as a legitimate force within Gotham's criminal ecosystem. The stolen medals that served as payment for the nuclear device represented more than simple transaction completion. They symbolized the transformation of amateur criminals into professional operators capable of acquiring and deploying the most dangerous weapons available on the black market. The decision to use the nuclear device as leverage for forcing the city government to rename a highway in her honor revealed the complex motivations that drove her criminal activities, combining practical objectives like public recognition with psychological needs for validation and acknowledgement that reflected the deep-seated insecurities and emotional wounds that her transformation had not fully healed. The highway naming represented both a concrete achievement and a symbolic victory over the societal institutions that had failed to recognize her exceptional capabilities during her legitimate career. The process of building her organization's operational capacity required Harley to develop leadership skills that drew upon her academic knowledge of group psychology and organizational behavior, while also learning through direct experience how to motivate and coordinate individuals whose personal histories and psychological profiles created unique challenges and opportunities. Each team member brought distinctive strengths and weaknesses that required different management approaches and motivational strategies. King Shark's recruitment added physical capabilities and technical expertise that complemented the supernatural and theatrical talents already present within the organization, while his background in social media and online communication provided access to promotional and recruitment tools that traditional criminal enterprises had been slow to adopt. His suggestion to establish an online presence for enhancing Harley's public profile reflected understanding of contemporary media dynamics and the importance of public perception in achieving long-term criminal success. The search for a suitable nemesis represented Harley's recognition that sustainable criminal enterprise in Gotham required more than simply avoiding law enforcement. It demanded the kind of ongoing conflict and public attention that could only be achieved through establishing adversarial relationships with respected heroes whose opposition would validate her importance and enhance her reputation. The psychological need for this kind of recognition reflected both her competitive nature and her understanding of how Gotham's unique ecosystem of heroism and villainy functioned. The failed attempts to provoke Batman into recognizing her as a worthy opponent revealed both the persistence required to achieve recognition within Gotham's established hierarchy of heroes and villains, and the specific challenges faced by newcomers seeking to establish their credentials without the benefit of historical precedent or institutional support. Batman's apparent disinterest in her activities forced her to escalate her methods and increase the scope of her operations in ways that attracted attention from other members of the Justice League. The encounters with Robin that resulted from these escalation efforts provided her with valuable experience in dealing with younger heroes, while also demonstrating the complex family dynamics that characterized the Bat family's approach to crime fighting and public relations. Robin's fabrication of stories about their confrontations for media consumption revealed the extent to which even heroes were willing to manipulate public perception and media coverage to serve their own interests and maintain their team reputations. The intervention of Lois Lane's critical coverage of these manufactured conflicts highlighted the broader political and social context within which Harley's criminal activities were occurring. As her emergence as an independent female villain created opportunities for commentary about gender dynamics within both criminal enterprise and heroic response. The criticism from feminist perspectives about the regressive nature of her apparent rivalry with a teenage male hero forced her to reconsider her strategic approach and public presentation. The eventual confrontation with Superman that resulted from her kidnapping of Lois Lane represented both the culmination of her efforts to establish herself as a significant threat and a demonstration of the limitations that even potting barn teas exceptional criminals faced when confronting opponents whose capabilities exceeded normal human parameters. Superman's casual dismissal of her threat and his escort of Robin to deal with her personally revealed that she had still not achieved the level of recognition and respect that she sought. The decision by both Superman and Lois Lane to remain unperturbed by her kidnapping attempt, treating it as more of an inconvenience than a genuine threat, forced Harley to acknowledge that her current methods and capabilities were insufficient to command the attention and respect of the most prominent figures in Gotham's heroic community. This realization prompted a fundamental reassessment of her strategic objectives and tactical approaches. The formation of her crew into an effective operational unit required months of training, coordination, and practical experience that tested both her leadership capabilities and their individual commitment to the collective enterprise. The process revealed the importance of establishing clear communication protocols, operational procedures, and conflict resolution mechanisms that could prevent internal disputes from compromising external operations. The development of their base of operations within Gotham Mall represented both a practical necessity and a symbolic statement about their place within the city's economic and social structure, as they established themselves in a location that had been abandoned by legitimate business interests, yet retained the infrastructure necessary for supporting complex criminal operations. The arrangement with Cyborg Man for shared use of the space demonstrated Harley's growing sophistication in negotiating mutually beneficial agreements with other criminal operators. The evolution of her leadership style throughout this period reflected both her academic understanding of organizational psychology and her practical experience with the unique challenges of managing individuals whose personal histories and psychological profiles created distinctive motivational patterns and behavioral tendencies. Her ability to adapt her approach to accommodate the specific needs and capabilities of each team member became one of her greatest strengths as a criminal leader. The establishment of operational protocols and strategic planning processes drew upon her professional background in mental health treatment while incorporating lessons learned from her time with the Joker about the importance of psychological manipulation and tactical surprise in achieving criminal objectives. The combination of systematic planning and spontaneous adaptation that characterized her approach reflected both her intellectual capabilities and her understanding of Gotham's unpredictable criminal environment. The success of her crew in establishing themselves as a recognized force within Gotham's criminal community represented more than simple achievement of individual goals. It demonstrated the viability of alternative approaches to criminal enterprise that emphasized collaboration, diversity, and innovation over traditional hierarchical structures and established territorial arrangements. Their example inspired other marginalized criminals to pursue similar organizational strategies and challenge the assumptions that had long governed criminal enterprise in Gotham. The recognition that came with successful establishment of her independent organization provided Harley with the validation and sense of accomplishment that had been missing from her life since her departure from legitimate psychiatric practice, yet it also revealed the ongoing psychological needs and emotional vulnerabilities that criminal success could not fully address. The satisfaction of professional achievement was complicated by the isolation that came with leadership responsibilities and the constant vigilance required to maintain her position within Gotham's competitive criminal environment. The transformation from isolated individual to leader of a successful criminal organization represented perhaps the most significant achievement of Harley's post-Joker existence, demonstrating her ability to channel her considerable talents and hard-won experience into constructive collaboration with others, while maintaining her independence and personal integrity. The crew she built became more than simply a collection of useful associates. They evolved into something resembling a chosen family that provided the emotional support and social connection that had been largely absent from her life since childhood. The evolution of Harley Quinn from independent criminal mastermind to someone capable of genuine romantic love represented perhaps the most complex and psychologically challenging transformation in her extraordinary journey, requiring her to navigate the treacherous territory between the emotional walls she had constructed for self-protection and the vulnerability necessary for authentic human connection. The gradual realization of her feelings for Poison Ivy unfolded over months of shared experiences and deepening trust, as friendship slowly metamorphosed into something more profound and potentially more dangerous than any criminal enterprise she had ever undertaken. The foundation of their relationship had been built during those early days at Arkham Asylum, when both women had been isolated within an institutional environment that dehumanized and brutalized its residents while claiming to provide treatment and rehabilitation. Their initial bond had formed through mutual recognition of shared intelligence, similar experiences of marginalization and misunderstanding, and the rare pleasure of encountering someone whose conversation could match their own intellectual capabilities and psychological sophistication. The months that followed Harley's liberation from the Joker's influence had deepened this connection in ways that neither woman fully understood or acknowledged, as their friendship provided both stability and emotional nourishment that had been largely absent from their previous experiences. The trust that developed between them was based not on manipulation or exploitation, but on genuine appreciation for each other's qualities and authentic concern for each other's well-being and happiness. Yet the recognition that her feelings for Ivy had evolved beyond friendship into something approaching romantic love created profound internal conflict for someone whose understanding of intimate relationships had been so thoroughly corrupted by her experiences with systematic manipulation and psychological abuse. The very concept of healthy romantic attachment seemed almost incomprehensible to someone whose most significant relationship had been characterized by deception, betrayal, and ultimately devastating abandonment. The complexity of her situation was further complicated by Ivy's existing relationship with Kite Man, a figure whose uncomplicated devotion and genuine kindness represented everything that had been absent from Harley's previous romantic experience, yet also highlighted her own inability to offer the kind of stable, drama-free partnership that someone as damaged as Ivy might desperately need after years of isolation and mistreatment. The internal struggle between her growing feelings and her fear of emotional vulnerability manifested itself in countless small moments and seemingly insignificant interactions that gradually revealed the depth of her attachment and the quiet extent to which Ivy had become central to her emotional well-being and sense of identity. The casual touches, lingering glances, and moments of protective instinct that characterized their friendship began to carry additional weight and meaning that neither woman was initially prepared to acknowledge or address directly. The realization that she was capable of experiencing genuine romantic attraction to another woman added additional layers of complexity to an already challenging psychological situation, forcing her to reconsider fundamental assumptions about her own identity and desires that had been shaped by years of societal conditioning and personal trauma. The discovery that her capacity for love had not been permanently destroyed by her experiences with the Joker provided both hope and terror, as it suggested that healing was possible while also creating the potential for new forms of pain and disappointment. The bachelorette party that Ivy organized for her impending wedding to Kite Man became the setting for the most emotionally intense and psychologically revealing interactions between the two women. As the celebration of Ivy's commitment to someone else forced Harley to confront her own feelings and make decisions about whether to pursue her desires or protect their friendship by maintaining appropriate boundaries. The intimate moments they shared during the party, particularly when alcohol lowered their normal inhibitions and defensive barriers, provided glimpses of the passionate connection that might exist between them if circumstances were different and if both women possessed the emotional courage to pursue such a dangerous and uncertain path. The morning after their shared intimacy, Ivy's panicked withdrawal and desperate attempts to rationalize away what had occurred revealed her own internal conflict and the extent to which she too was struggling with feelings that challenged her existing commitments and self-understanding. The weekend that followed this revelation became a carefully orchestrated dance of approach and avoidance, as both women attempted to process what had occurred between them while maintaining the facade of normal friendship and mutual support for Ivy's upcoming marriage. The tension that characterized their interactions revealed the impossibility of returning to their previous dynamic now that the potential for romantic connection had been acknowledged, however briefly and incompletely. The mission they undertook to thwart Ares and save Themyscira provided them with opportunities for physical closeness and emotional intimacy that might otherwise have been inappropriate or impossible to justify. As the crisis situation created legitimate reasons for protective behavior and physical contact that could be rationalized as necessary for their mutual survival rather than expressions of romantic desire. The celebration that followed their successful completion of this mission created conditions where alcohol and adrenaline combined to lower inhibitions once again, leading to another night of intimate connection that left both women even more confused and emotionally vulnerable than they had been before. The pattern of approach and withdrawal that characterized their interactions reflected the profound ambivalence both women felt about pursuing a relationship that could potentially destroy their friendship while offering possibilities for happiness and fulfillment that neither had previously imagined possible. Ivy's ultimate decision to proceed with her marriage to Kite Man, despite the obvious attraction and emotional connection she shared with Harley, represented both a retreat to safety and a rejection of the transformative potential that their relationship offered. The choice to embrace conventional stability over passionate uncertainty revealed the depth of her own psychological wounds and her fear that someone as damaged as herself was incapable of sustaining the kind of intense and demanding relationship that romantic involvement with Harley would undoubtedly require. The devastation that Harley experienced following this rejection was complicated by her understanding that Ivy's choice was motivated by self-protection rather than lack of feeling, making it impossible for her to respond with anger or resentment while also making acceptance and emotional recovery extraordinarily difficult. The recognition that she was being rejected not because she was unworthy of love, but because love itself seemed too dangerous for someone with Ivy's history of trauma and betrayal, added layers of complexity to her grief that prevented simple emotional processing or straightforward healing. The period of separation and individual growth that followed this devastating disappointment provided both women with opportunities to develop greater self-understanding and emotional maturity, while also testing the strength of their friendship and their commitment to each other's well-being despite the romantic complications that had developed between them. The time apart allowed them to gain perspective on their feelings and make more rational assessments of what they truly wanted and what they were capable of sustaining. The crisis that eventually brought them back together, involving threats to both their physical safety and their individual goals and aspirations, created conditions where their mutual concern and protective instincts overrode the awkwardness and emotional complexity that had characterized their recent interactions. The shared danger and the need for tactical cooperation reminded them of the strength and effectiveness of their partnership, while also providing opportunities for the kind of honest communication that had been missing from their relationship since the first acknowledgement of romantic feelings. The gradual process of rebuilding trust and emotional intimacy, while navigating the ongoing complications of their romantic attraction, required both women to develop new levels of emotional intelligence and communication skills that neither had previously possessed. The conversations they shared about their fears, desires, and past traumas created foundations for authentic relationship that transcended the superficial connections that had characterized most of their previous romantic experiences. The external pressures and threats that continue to target them because of their criminal activities and unconventional lifestyle choices served both to complicate their relationship development and to strengthen their commitment to each other by providing concrete evidence of how much they were willing to sacrifice for each other's safety and happiness. The loyalty they demonstrated during periods of crisis revealed the depth of their emotional connection and their mutual commitment to protecting what they had built together. The confrontation with Gordon and the subsequent pursuit that forced them to flee Gotham and embark on their infamous Eat, Bang, Kill tour provided them with the first extended period of uninterrupted time together since the Fashion Sealmai end. Acknowledgement of their romantic feelings, creating opportunities for intimacy and relationship development that would have been impossible while maintaining their normal criminal operations and social obligations. The road trip that followed became both a practical necessity for their physical safety and a psychological journey of discovery about their compatibility as romantic partners rather than simply friends and criminal collaborators. The challenges they faced while traveling together, from external threats to internal conflicts, tested every aspect of their relationship and forced them to develop the kind of honest communication and mutual support that sustainable romantic partnerships required. The encounters with Harley's family during this period revealed the extent to which her childhood trauma and ongoing psychological wounds continued to influence her adult relationships and her capacity for emotional intimacy. The confrontations with her parents, particularly the devastating betrayal by her father who attempted to kill her for the bounty on her head, demonstrated that her past continued to pose active threats to her present happiness and future security. The support that Ivy provided during these family crises revealed both her commitment to their relationship and her understanding of how past trauma could continue to influence present behavior and emotional responses. Her willingness to stand by Harley during these confrontations with toxic family members demonstrated the kind of loyalty and protective instinct that characterized the healthiest aspects of their connection. The various criminal enterprises they undertook during their travels served multiple purposes beyond simple financial gain, providing them with shared challenges and accomplishments that strengthened their partnership, while also allowing them to explore how their different skills and approaches could complement each other in ways that enhanced both their individual capabilities and their effectiveness as a team. The intimate moments they shared during this period of travel and shared adventure revealed both the passionate intensity of their romantic connection and their growing emotional maturity and capacity for mutual support and blend. Understanding. The physical intimacy they explored was balanced by increasing emotional vulnerability and authentic communication about their fears, hopes, and dreams for their shared future. The various threats and challenges they faced from law enforcement, rival criminals, and other external enemies served to strengthen their bond by providing concrete evidence of their mutual commitment and willingness to sacrifice for each other's safety and well-being. The loyalty they demonstrated during moments of crisis revealed the depth of their emotional investment in their relationship and their determination to protect what they had built together, despite the obvious dangers and complications involved. The gradual evolution of their dynamic from friends to lovers to true partners represented one of the most psychologically complex and emotionally demanding transformations either woman had ever undertaken, requiring them to overcome decades of trauma, mistrust, and defensive mechanisms while learning to be vulnerable with someone whose well-being had become more important to them than their own survival or individual goals. The recognition that they had created something genuine and valuable together, despite their individual psychological wounds and the challenging circumstances that surrounded their relationship, provided both women with a sense of hope and possibility that had been largely absent from their previous experiences with romantic love and emotional intimacy. The knowledge that they were capable of sustaining a healthy relationship despite their troubled histories offered evidence that healing and growth remained possible even after the most devastating betrayals and traumatic experiences. The decision to formalize their commitment to each other and build a shared life together represented both the culmination of their individual growth and the beginning of a new phase of existence that would test their ability to maintain their partnership while pursuing their individual goals and managing the external pressures that continued to threaten their safety and happiness. The transformation of their relationship from friendship through crisis and uncertainty to stable romantic partnership demonstrated that even the most damaged individuals could learn to love and be loved authentically if they possessed sufficient courage to be vulnerable and sufficient commitment to do the difficult work that healthy relationships required. Their journey together became a testament to the possibility of healing and growth, even after the most devastating psychological trauma and betrayal. The unexpected trajectory that would lead Harley Quinn towards something resembling heroism began not with moral revelation or sudden ethical awakening, but rather with the practical recognition that her criminal enterprises had evolved beyond simple personal gratification or financial gain into something that increasingly resembled protection of those who could not protect themselves. The transformation from agent of chaos to reluctant guardian emerged gradually through a series of choices that revealed the persistent influence of her original humanitarian motivations, despite years of corruption and systematic psychological damage. The invitation to join the Bat family represented perhaps the most improbable development in her entire extraordinary journey, as it required both Batman's recognition of her potential for positive change and her own willingness to embrace constraints and moral limitations that seemed fundamentally incompatible with the freedom and autonomy she had fought so hard to achieve after her liberation from the Joker's control. The decision to accept this invitation marked the beginning of the most psychologically challenging phase of her post-transformation existence. The adjustment to working within the moral and operational framework that governed the Bat family's activities proved extraordinarily difficult for someone whose recent experiences had been characterized by complete freedom from external ethical constraints and institutional oversight. The no-kill rule that served as the fundamental principle underlying all of their operations created constant internal conflict for someone whose criminal career had involved considerable violence and whose psychological conditioning had eliminated many of the normal inhibitions against lethal force. The philosophical challenges posed by attempting to maintain this ethical standard while confronting enemies whose own moral limitations made them extraordinarily dangerous revealed the complex relationship between principle and pragmatism that defined heroic action in Gotham's unique criminal environment. Each encounter that required her to choose between effective solution of immediate problems and adherence to abstract ethical principles tested her commitment to her new identity and her understanding of what heroism actually required. The relationship dynamics within the extended Bat family created additional layers of complexity as she attempted to establish her credibility and earn acceptance from individuals whose own traumatic histories and psychological wounds made them naturally suspicious of anyone associated with Gotham's criminal underworld. Barbara Gordon's initial hostility reflected not only professional skepticism about her commitment to heroic principles, but also personal understanding of the damage that criminals could inflict on innocent people and the institutions designed to protect them. The gradual development of mutual respect and eventual friendship with Barbara required both women to overcome preconceptions and defensive reactions that had been shaped by their different experiences with violence, trauma, and institutional authority. Barbara's perspective as both a victim of criminal violence and a dedicated law enforcement professional provided valuable insights into the long-term consequences of criminal actions, while also revealing the potential for healing and growth even after the most devastating personal losses. Nightwing's approach to her integration into the team reflected his own experience with redemption and second chances, as his background as a former sidekick who had evolved into an independent hero provided him with understanding of the challenges involved in developing a new identity while carrying the weight of past mistakes and questionable associations. His willingness to serve as mentor and advocate within the group demonstrated the kind of patient guidance and emotional support that effective rehabilitation required. The training regimen that accompanied her integration into the Bat family's operations forced her to develop new combat techniques and tactical approaches that emphasized restraint, precision, and protection of innocent bystanders rather than the overwhelming application of force that had characterized her criminal methodology. The physical discipline required to master these new approaches paralleled the mental discipline necessary to consistently choose difficult ethical paths over expedient solutions to complex problems. The parallel evolution of Ivy's career within the Legion of Doom created interesting tensions and complications for their romantic relationship, as both women found themselves pursuing paths that might eventually bring them into direct conflict despite their personal commitment to each other's happiness and success. Ivy's ascension to positions of corporate leadership and strategic influence within the criminal organization represented both professional achievement and potential source of ethical compromise that could threaten the foundation of Sis Lee Femmes. Their partnership, the corporate environment that Ivy encountered within Lex Luthor's organization revealed the sophisticated nature of contemporary criminal enterprise, which had evolved far beyond simple robbery and violence into complex financial manipulation and institutional corruption that affected millions of people through mechanisms that were largely invisible to traditional law enforcement approaches. Her navigation of this environment required the same kind of ethical decision-making that Harley was experiencing within the heroic community. The challenges of maintaining their romantic relationship while pursuing increasingly divergent professional paths tested both women's commitment to personal growth and mutual support, despite the obvious complications and potential conflicts of interest that their choices created. The conversations they shared about their respective moral dilemmas revealed the depth of their emotional connection and their mutual commitment to maintaining their individual integrity while supporting each other's aspirations and goals. The time travel experience that revealed their potential daughter from a dystopian future provided both women with profound insights into the long-term consequences of their choices and the importance of maintaining open communication and mutual support despite the pressures and complications that their individual careers created. The vision of their future child, raised by others due to their communication failures and relationship problems, served as powerful motivation for addressing current issues before they could develop into more serious problems. The revelation that their relationship breakdown had contributed to a dystopian future where Robin had become a tyrannical ruler demonstrated the interconnected nature of personal and political choices in Gotham's unique social ecosystem. The knowledge that their individual happiness and relationship stability had broader implications for social justice and democratic institutions added additional weight to their efforts to maintain healthy communication and mutual support, despite external pressures. The encounter with their adult daughter, who had been raised by others yet retained deep affection and respect for both her mothers despite their failures as parents, provided evidence that love and positive influence could persist even when relationships faced seemingly insurmountable challenges. The forgiveness and understanding that their future child offered served as inspiration for continuing to work on their relationship and personal growth, despite the difficulties and setbacks they encountered. The return to their original timeline with knowledge of potential future consequences created both opportunity and responsibility for making different choices that might lead to better outcomes for themselves and the broader community they sought to serve. The burden of this knowledge required both women to carefully consider the long-term implications of their actions, while also maintaining focus on immediate challenges and responsibilities. The clone incident that forced Harley to confront the reality that she had been responsible for Nightwing's apparent death while sleepwalking revealed the extent to which her psychological trauma and suppressed memories continued to influence her behavior in ways that she could not consciously control or prevent. The discovery that she was capable of violence even while unconscious challenged her understanding of her own moral development and raised questions about her fitness for heroic responsibilities. The psychological investigation that uncovered the truth about her unconscious actions required her to work with Dr. Psycho despite their complicated history and his questionable moral character, demonstrating her willingness to seek help from any available source when confronting problems that exceeded her individual capacity to understand or resolve. The therapeutic process that revealed her suppressed memories provided insights into the ongoing influence of her traumatic experiences and the importance of continued psychological work. The ethical complexity of dealing with the clone who had been created from her genetic material yet possessed independent consciousness and moral agency highlighted the philosophical questions about identity, responsibility, and redemption that characterized many of the challenges faced by those who sought to transition from criminal to heroic careers. The clone's decision to pursue vigilante activities that violated the Bat family's ethical standards created conflicts that required careful consideration of competing moral obligations and practical concerns. The formation of the Gotham City Sirens with Barbara Gordon and Catwoman represented both professional alliance and personal friendship network that provided mutual support and collaborative capability for addressing challenges that exceeded any individual's capacity to handle alone. The combination of their different skills, perspectives, and resources created synergistic effects that enhanced their individual effectiveness, while also providing emotional support and accountability systems that helped maintain their commitment to heroic principles. The investigation into Nightwing's disappearance and apparent death revealed the complex web of deception and manipulation that characterized Gotham's criminal underworld, while also demonstrating the importance of collaborative investigation techniques and mutual support systems in uncovering truth and achieving justice. The discovery that his death had been staged as part of a larger conspiracy provided both relief and additional motivation for continuing their work despite the dangers and complications involved. The philosophical evolution that accompanied Harley's transition from criminal to hero revealed the fundamental compatibility between her original humanitarian motivations and the ethical principles that governed heroic action, suggesting that her transformation had involved not the adoption of entirely new values, but rather the recovery and refinement of moral commitments that had been corrupted rather than destroyed by her traumatic experiences. The recognition that heroism required not just the power to protect others, but also the wisdom to recognize when protection might cause more harm than good, revealed the intellectual and emotional sophistication necessary for making complex, moral decisions under conditions of uncertainty and time pressure. The development of this kind of judgment required both practical experience and ongoing reflection about the consequences of actions taken in service of apparently noble goals. The ongoing tension between her commitment to non-violence and her understanding of the sometimes lethal nature of the threats faced by innocent people created constant opportunities for moral growth and ethical refinement as she learned to find creative solutions that honored both her principles and her practical responsibilities. The development of techniques that could neutralize dangerous opponents without killing them required both physical skill and psychological understanding of how to achieve lasting behavior change through means other than elimination. The support system that developed within the Bat family and the broader heroic community provided essential resources for maintaining psychological stability and moral clarity despite the constant exposure to violence, trauma, and systematic evil that characterized their work. The relationships she formed with other heroes revealed the importance of mutual support and collaborative problem-solving in sustaining long-term commitment to difficult ethical standards under challenging circumstances. The recognition that her journey from criminal to hero was not complete, but rather ongoing, requiring constant vigilance and conscious choice to maintain her commitment to positive values despite ongoing temptations and external pressures, demonstrated the mature understanding of moral development as a lifelong process rather than a destination that could be reached through single transformative experiences. The integration of her romantic relationship with Ivy into her heroic identity required both women to navigate the complex ethical implications of loving someone whose professional activities might conflict with heroic principles while also maintaining individual autonomy and moral integrity. The success of this integration provided evidence that personal happiness and professional ethics could coexist when approached with sufficient commitment to honest communication and mutual respect for individual growth and development. And so concludes this chapter in the ever-evolving saga of Harley Quinzel, the woman who journeyed from the sterile halls of academia through the twisted corridors of Arkham into the chaotic embrace of madness, and ultimately towards something resembling wisdom. Her story reminds us that transformation is never truly complete, that growth comes through the crucible of loss and love, and that even the most shattered minds can piece themselves together into something beautiful and whole. In her journey from victim to victimizer to something approaching heroism, Harley Quinn embodies the eternal human struggle between chaos and order, dependence and independence, love and obsession. Her tale serves as both cautionary warning and inspiring testament to the possibility of change, the power of chosen family, and the truth that our greatest strength often emerges from our deepest wounds. Rest now, gentle dreamer, knowing that like Harley herself, we all possess the capacity for reinvention, for growth beyond our circumstances, and for love that transcends the boundaries we thought were permanent. In Gotham's shadows and in our own hearts, the possibility of transformation never truly ends.